check this out. This is the Dark Knight Trilogy Blu-ray box set. This is how I watch the trilogy whenever I watch it. It's pretty cool. And it comes with an art book. The art and making of the Dark Knight Trilogy. Yeah, check that out. That's pretty cool, huh? Here, look through it real quick. All right, now let's talk about the concluding chapter of the Dark Knight Trilogy. The Dark Knight Rises. So The Dark Knight Rises came out in July of 2012, about 8.5 years ago, a couple months after the first Avengers movie came out. And like I said, it's the concluding chapter of Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy, and it really just closes the book and ends the story of the Batman in the best way I could have asked for from a finale. The Dark Knight Rises picks up 8 years after the events of The Dark Knight, and Gotham City seems like it's in peacetime, but really things are not going so well. Since Bruce Wayne / Batman took the fall for Harvey Dent's murder, so now Batman is seen as like this huge criminal, Bruce Wayne has pretty much become a recluse. He's a cripple, he limps around on his cane, he's pretty much broke. Wayne Enterprises not making a lot of profit. Jim Gordon feels like all the weight is on his shoulders, that he has to cover up the lie that Harvey Dent stood for truth and justice, when in reality he became corrupt and almost killed his son. There's no more organized crime in Gotham, but this peace is a false peace because it was based on a lie, which makes for the perfect time for a new villain to step onto the scene. Bane, played by Tom Hardy. Now, I'm just gonna go right into Bane here because Bane is an awesome villain. I mean, the first thing you really notice about him is, in fact, his voice. You've heard it by now. Because he's wearing that scary-looking mask, he's really fun to impersonate.
Patience has cost you your strength. Victory has defeated you.
He has a lot of sweet lines in this movie. And he comes to Gotham with a huge plan. He's gonna liberate this city. He's gonna give the
Power back to the people.
So it's like he's going to free the city from the oppressors, when in reality he actually has a nuclear bomb that he's gonna fry the city with. Which pretty much means that Bane is a terrorist. And he's also really ripped. Dude, this guy is enormous. He's super big and super strong, and it definitely shows. Whenever he beats the shit out of someone, first of all, you hear and you feel those punches. Bane doesn't just punch someone in the face, he cracks their skull. Which is why when Bruce Wayne sees Bane, he's like, alright, I gotta come back as Batman, I guess. Bruce Wayne hasn't suited up in Batman for 8 years, and now suddenly this big huge Bane terrorist steps onto the scene. Batman's gonna be pretty rusty going up against this dude, and it's just not a pretty fight, not for Batman. And this movie also introduces Selina Kyle, who is known in most Batman lore as Catwoman. She's played by Anne Hathaway, and in my opinion, this is the definitive Catwoman in any Batman media. I mean it too. Games, comic books, movies, TV shows, whatever, this is like the Catwoman to end them all. Everything about Anne Hathaway's Selina Kyle absolutely screams Catwoman to me. The way she acts, the way she moves, the way she talks. The movie starts out, she's a common cat burglar, and she's acting all sly around Bruce Wayne. Plus, she is also super hot in this movie, dude. Thin as a twig. To this day, I'm pretty sure this is the hottest I've ever seen Anne Hathaway. Whenever she's wearing that skin-tight leather suit, I'm just like, yeah, that works. And she can also throw down with goons. There's a point where she and Batman are fighting a bunch of Bane's goons. It's a great action scene. I mean, all the action scenes in this movie are very well choreographed. And you can tell that a lot of love was put into this movie. And a lot of money. Because I feel like most of this movie was shot in IMAX. I mean, after The Dark Knight and Inception, Christopher Nolan was like, oh, okay, people like it when I use IMAX? I'm just gonna go full force with it in this movie then. The IMAX in this movie is not just used for the action scenes, but pretty much any important scene in the movie. If it's a relevant scene where two people are just talking, but it's really important to the movie, it'll be shot in IMAX. And again, it's just beautiful and visually stunning. One other character I really like in this movie is Joseph Gordon-Levitt's character, John Blake. He's a Gotham City police officer who really wants to be on top of things. I mean, the word to describe him is idealistic. He's a good person who really just wants to do his best to help protect the city. And I love his story arc in this movie. The interactions he has with Jim Gordon and Bruce Wayne make him a really sympathetic character. One of the most sympathetic characters in this movie, if not the most. Now, this movie does a really good job at feeding off the events of the previous two movies. It totally does. It takes events from Batman Begins into account and The Dark Knight. It wraps up all the loose ends, which really does help and contribute to this movie feeling like the end of one big 7.5 hour story. It's like, no, those things that happened in Batman Begins all those years ago, they're still relevant now. And The Dark Knight, like I said, Jim Gordon is still covering up the lie about Harvey Dent. And although the Joker is never mentioned, you can still tell, when you think about it, that he has still set a precedent. Like, the things that happened in this movie are what the Joker was warning us about. And that is some pretty cool filmmaking, if I do say so myself. But that being said, this movie still does bring new elements to the table, like Bane and Catwoman. It's a long movie too. It's 2 hours and 45 minutes. And it does feel long, but that is absolutely a good thing, because it takes its time to tell tell this complete story of the fate of the Batman and Gotham City. The big message here is how far one is willing to go to save one's city. And that is just textbook definitive Batman to me. Batman is that hero who is willing to lay everything on the line, and that really shows in this movie. And to me, that's just what makes Batman great. And I know that this movie does have some haters out there. I've heard some complaints like, oh, this movie's just trying to copy what The Dark Knight did, or there are some things in this movie that are too convenient or unbelievable in a trilogy that's all about bringing superheroes down to realism. And I guess I get those complaints, but I mean, I don't see how this movie is anything like The Dark Knight at all. Its vibe and tone are completely different if you ask me. But as for the conveniences, yeah, I will say this movie does have a couple of conveniences. The biggest, most unbelievable thing in this movie, I would have to say, is the Batwing. That's just called the Bat in this movie. And yeah, I will say in this trilogy that is centered around realism, having this giant flying Batwing, it's pretty out there. Because vehicles like that, I don't even know what you call it. Is it a jet? Well, whatever it is, they don't exist in our world. At least not as far as I know. The way I see it, it's this movie's way of being the biggest of the three, and you can't deny that it is. In spectacle, scope, and story, this is undeniably the biggest movie of the Dark Knight Trilogy. Seeing as most of it was shot in IMAX, and the events that transpire within this movie, it's so big. It totally justifies being 2 hours and 45 minutes long. And with the Batwing, yeah, okay, sure, it is kind of unrealistic. But that being said, it looks pretty cool, so there that is. The score in this movie was done once again by Hans Zimmer, but no James Newton Howard this time. And the themes that Hans Zimmer brings into this one for Bane and for Catwoman, they are awesome. I mean, for Catwoman, he brings in that little piano riff, that da-da-da-da-da, which is completely Catwoman vibe. Whenever I hear it, my mind just goes straight to Anne Hathaway's Selena Kyle. But of course, the big new theme that Zimmer introduced here is that Rise chant, that Hasha, Hasha, Issy, Issy, Hasha. You hear that a lot throughout this movie, especially when Bane is doing his thing and beating the shit out of people. It's awesome. And of course, you know, he brings back the original Batman themes from Batman Begins. It's all back here, and when mixed with Bane's Rise chant and Selena Kyle's Catwoman theme, it's just an all-around awesome score. So in conclusion, The Dark Knight Rises is a fantastic end to the Dark Knight Trilogy, one of the best superhero trilogies out there, as I've been saying. It does its job perfectly, which is to be the big, epic conclusion that this trilogy needs. It's the biggest of the three movies. It's my second favorite of the three. It's probably the most epic one, too. Once again, I love what Bruce Wayne goes through in this movie. Bane is an awesome villain with lots and lots of memorable, quotable lines.
Let the games begin!
He's a super formidable opponent to Batman. You look at him in that fight halfway through the movie between Batman and Bane, you're like, Batman has no chance in hell of beating this guy. That's one of the best scenes in the movie. It really is. Anne Hathaway's Selena Kyle is the definitive Catwoman. I will defend that to my death. Hans Zimmer's score is fantastic. Just this movie delivers everything I could want in a finale to an awesome trilogy. And then some. And in the end, I'm glad I got to make these videos about this awesome trilogy. Like I said, these movies are the best movies to come out of DC, so far anyway. Because what Christopher Nolan did with Batman in this trilogy is he transcended the genre of superhero comic book movie into something more. That's why I don't like calling the Dark Knight Trilogy comic book movies. They're just realistic action movies that happen to have comic book characters in them. That's how I see it anyway. Christian Bale will always be my favorite cinematic Batman. Great job, Michael Caine as Alfred, Morgan Freeman as Lucius Fox. Everyone does a great job in this trilogy, in front of and behind the cameras. I love this trilogy so much. So The Dark Knight Rises, have you seen it? What do you think about it? Are you one of the haters? How does it compare to all the other Batman movies for you? What do you think of Tom Hardy's Bane, Anne Hathaway's Selena Kyle? Just what are your thoughts on the Dark Knight Trilogy as a whole? Here's your chance to lay it all out. So whatever you think, go ahead and leave a comment.
And don't forget to subscribe, or I will break you.